The fluorescent bulbs in the prep room hummed faintly, the way they always did, a low vibration you stopped noticing after years of working beneath them. I'd been in that room since late afternoon, working through the final sutures on a young man who had come in 2 nights earlier. 24 years old, struck by a delivery truck. The damage had been extensive, and I'd done what I could to restore him to something his mother might recognize without flinching. That's the part people never see. The quiet work of hands pulling torn skin back together, stitching, smoothing, filling, adjusting. By the time families walk in, they see only peace, but we carry the memory of what came before. It was close to midnight. Dana had gone home hours earlier, and Henry was waiting for me in the house upstairs, but I'd chosen to stay behind. I told him I wanted to finish the cosmetics before morning, though truthfully, it was the silence I needed. The prep room at night has a stillness no church can match, a kind of pure quiet that belongs only to the dead. The tiled floor smelled faintly of disinfectant, undercut with that sweet chemical bite of formaldehyde that clings to your throat no matter how well the ventilation works. I was rinsing the forceps when I first heard it, a thin, sliding whisper, like fabric brushing against fabric. At first I thought it was the vent, but the sound had a cadence to it, a shape that felt intentional. It came from my left, where the instrument drawer sat half shut, the steel handle catching the light. I stopped what I was doing and stood very still. The sound ended. I opened the drawer. Nothing. Scalpel handles, suturing needles, clamps, all resting in their shallow trays, perfectly arranged the way I always kept them. I closed it again, harder this time. The whisper resumed. It wasn't loud, not even distinct, more like several low voices speaking through layers of cloth. The kind of sound you lean into without realizing it, straining to catch a single word. I pulled the drawer open once more. Silence. My hands trembled slightly as I touched each tool, as though one might burn me if I lingered too long. I left it open and returned to my work. The room stayed quiet. When I finally slid the drawer shut again, the murmurs rose. Clearer now, urgent. I swear I heard my name, Clara, drawn out like breath leaking from a punctured lung. My first thought was exhaustion. After decades in this business, you learn the tricks your mind can play on you. A settling floorboard, a chemical haze, the memory of too many voices silenced too soon. Still, I found myself whispering aloud, "Stop it." The voices hushed as if they had obeyed. That night, I told Henry over tea. He chuckled, shook his head, said I'd been working too many late hours. He reminded me I had once fallen asleep in that room and dreamed the old embalming table tipped over by itself. But when I insisted, his expression tightened. "Don't let Dana catch wind of it. You'll scare her off, and we need her." Of course, Dana noticed anyway. She always did. A week later, when we were alone after a service, she leaned against the prep counter and asked, too casually, "So, have you heard them?" I froze. She smiled, half nervous, half thrilled. She said, "The drawer, voices, right?" I wanted to deny it, but something in her eyes kept me silent. She pushed the drawer open with one finger, peered inside, then slid it shut again. We both waited. The whispers started again, unmistakable. Dana gasped and stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. She whispered to me, "They're saying your name." That night, Henry came down with me, grumbling the whole way, determined to prove us both ridiculous. I stood behind him as he opened and closed the drawer. At first, there was nothing. He shot me a triumphant look, muttering, "See?" But when he slid it closed again, the murmurs rose like a tide. He froze. We both leaned in. Among the layers of indistinct speech, one phrase lifted clear as glass. "Do you remember, Clara?" Henry's face drained of color. He slammed the drawer open, but the voices stopped. Since then, I can't touch those instruments without hearing them. They speak of the young mother who drowned in her own bathtub,
the factory worker crushed under a conveyor belt, the old woman who whispered for her son with her final breath. Details I never repeated to anyone, details only I would know. Sometimes the voices plead, sometimes they accuse, and always they remember. The worst was last week. I had just finished with a farmer who shot himself out by his barn. I set the suture needle down, wiped my gloves, and closed the drawer. The voices began at once, but this time they didn't circle around the dead I'd tended before. This time they said something new. Over and over, in dozens of tones layered on top of each other, they repeated one word: return. I haven't told Dana or Henry about that. I don't know what it means or why it was spoken with such urgency, like a demand. I only know that when I press my ear close to the steel, I feel the cold seep through, and I hear them waiting for me to answer. And now, each time I open the drawer, I find myself staring at the empty trays, wondering if they want something returned, exactly what do they believe I took?
Hello, YouTube family. Thanks for watching. Big love to our subscribers. You keep this channel alive. Only about 20% of viewers are subscribed, so if you enjoy the chills, hit that subscribe button. It's quick, it helps a ton, and it means more stories coming your way. See you in the next one, if you dare.
I should never have agreed to write this down, but I can't carry it any longer. My hands still smell of formaldehyde no matter how much I scrub, and my eyes keep drifting back to the corner of the embalming room window, half expecting to see her reflection waiting. If you're reading this, know that I did everything by the book, every procedure exact, every stitch neat, and still, the dead found a way to mock me. The woman came in on a Tuesday, late afternoon, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly above the stainless steel prep table as Dr. Carver wheeled her in. Her skin was pale and slightly bloated, the way drowning victims often are, and the river smell clung stubbornly even after the first rinse. Carver signed off quickly, muttering something about just water damage, then vanished before the gurney's wheels stopped squeaking. I remember looking at the body tag, Sylvia Brandt, age 71, and thinking, just another job, nothing unusual. But when I turned to unwrap her face, I saw it. Her lips had twisted back, not slack in the way of death, but pulled taut, revealing the top row of teeth and a grin too wide, too deliberate. Not a rictus, not the stiffening of muscles I'd seen 100 times before. This was something else. I adjusted the jaw, pressed down gently to close the mouth. It stayed for a moment. Then the corners curled back as if tugged by invisible strings. Monica, my apprentice, leaned over my shoulder and whispered, "She's smiling." I hushed her, told her it was just tissue contraction, but even as I sutured the lips shut, threading neat bites through skin and gum, I felt the resistance, as if she was pulling against me. Every mortician learns early, the dead don't move. They seep, they swell, they stiffen, but they never act. That's the rule. The first night, I broke it by working past midnight. I should have left her as she was, but I couldn't. I was determined to restore dignity, to erase that grin. By the time I turned off the prep room lights, her mouth was sealed shut, neat and proper. Yet when I unlocked the doors the next morning, her lips were peeled back again, wider, gums stretched dry against the air. The sutures lay snipped at her side, like someone had undone them with careful hands. Monica wouldn't enter the room at first. "I didn't touch her," she said, shaking her head, voice cracking. I wanted to believe her. I even checked the footage from the hallway cameras. Nothing but me, locking up, then unlocking again. No one entered in the hours between. Still, the smile grew deeper with each attempt. By Friday, the corners of her lips stretched so far I could see the dark recess where her tongue should have rested. And always, when I caught my reflection in the window above the sink, I'd see her eyes behind me,
open now, glassy, watching. The strangest moment came during the aunt's visit. Sylvia Brandt walked in slow, clutching her purse like a lifeline. She took one look at the body and muttered, "That isn't my niece's mouth. That's the river's mark." Her voice was steady, too steady. "She belonged to the water now. You shouldn't have dragged her back." Before I could answer, she turned and walked out, never signing the register, never even asking about the funeral arrangements. At night I began dreaming of her. I'd wake drenched in sweat, certain I'd heard water dripping on the floor beside my bed. Once I swear the sheets were damp, though by morning they were dry. In the dream she always stood the same way, by the foot of the mattress, hair clinging to her temples, whispering, "Join me beneath." I told myself it was exhaustion, the mind replaying too many hours surrounded by chemicals and silence. But when I checked the mirror one morning, my lips ached as if they'd been stretched wide in the night. By the following week, Monica stopped showing up. No notice, no call, just vanished. Carver brushed it off when I mentioned her absence, said young apprentices never lasted long. He didn't even look at the body again, though I asked him to. And still I kept working, kept trying to restore a face that refused to stay still. That was my mistake. Persistence where there should have been surrender. The last time I entered the embalming room, I didn't even bother with the instruments. I just stood there in the humming quiet, the smell of preservative sharp in the air. Her mouth was stretched wider than I thought skin could allow, corners pulled almost to the ears. And in the window above the sink, she wasn't lying on the table anymore. She was standing, shoulders dripping, grin endless. The reflection blinked. I haven't gone back since. I don't know what became of the body or Monica or whether anyone else has seen what I saw. All I know is that every night, just before I drift to sleep, I feel the corners of my lips tightening upward, stretching against my will. I wonder how long before the smile stays, before I wake to find my reflection grinning back at me with her eyes. If you work with the dead, remember this. Don't fight their expressions. Don't try to fix what won't stay fixed. Some faces are no longer theirs to control. Tell me, if you ever find yourself smiling without reason, teeth bared in the dark, how will you know it's still your own face?
I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe so I can see the words outside of my own head. Maybe so the guilt doesn't swallow me whole. My name is Julian Hart. I'm a mortician here in Ashwick, a small town where I've prepared bodies for burial for nearly 2 decades. Friday nights are usually my quiet hours. Paperwork finished, the embalming room washed down, the low hum of the refrigeration units filling the silence like a heartbeat. That night should have been like any other, but it wasn't. The body came in just after dusk, delivered in a closed, reinforced casket. A man named Walter Greer, reclusive, lived alone in a crumbling farmhouse. His sister, Martha, brought him in herself, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel of the hearse as if she didn't trust anyone else to drive. She was firm. No embalming, no viewing, no lid ever to be opened. He is to remain sealed, Julian. Do you understand? Her voice had the finality of someone speaking a sentence, not a request. I've honored stranger wishes before, so I nodded and signed the intake forms. Still, the instinct in me, the part that has handled thousands of bodies, twitched. Something was off. Caleb Dunn, our cemetery groundskeeper, helped me bring the casket down into the embalming room for overnight holding. As we set it on the table, he cocked his head. Listening. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I didn't at first, only the rattle of the gurney wheels. Then, a faint tap.
tap, like knuckles on hollow wood. I brushed it off. Wood contracts in cooler air. Latches shift. Caleb wasn't convinced. "That's not wood, Julian. That's someone in there." He backed away, shaking his head. When I asked if he'd be on hand for the burial in the morning, he refused. "I don't dig a hole for the living," he muttered, and he left me alone with it. Hours passed. I busied myself with ledgers, disinfecting instruments, the rituals that keep me sane. At around 11:15, when the whole building should have been still, the thuds came again. Not random creaks, not settling timber. 3 sharp strikes, then silence. Then a slow scrape, deliberate and measured, as if fingernails dragged against the inside of the lid. I froze at my desk, pen dripping ink onto the logbook. My breath turned shallow. The embalming room lights flickered once, and the air felt too close, too heavy. I told myself to check, to prove it was nothing. My hands shook as I unlatched the metal restraints. The metal was cool, almost damp, and the wood had bowed outward as if pressed from within. I slipped the crowbar under the lip and forced it open. The hinges groaned like something exhaling. Inside lay Walter Greer, pale and still, the faint smell of earth and old linen rising around him. His jaw was tied shut, his suit neatly pressed. By every measure, he was dead, except the inside of the lid. Fresh gouges marred the varnish, deep and ragged, each mark trailing thin curls of wood. They were not there when I first received him. I pressed my palms against the table to steady myself. I wanted to call Officer Brad Langley right then, but I knew what he'd say. When he did come the following morning, after Martha insisted the casket be resealed, he dismissed the scratches. "Probably moisture, termites, who knows? You've been staring at the dead too long." He laughed like it was a harmless story, then warned me not to disturb grieving families with ghost tales. Easy for him to say. He hadn't heard the knocking. At the funeral service, the chapel was packed with townsfolk, curious to see who would actually show up for Walter. Martha sat in the front row, stone-faced, her hands gripping the hymn book so tightly the cover bent. My daughter Ivy, who often slips into services when she's with me, tugged on my sleeve midway through the prayers. "Daddy," she whispered, "why is he knocking?" My stomach clenched. I looked at her, then at the casket, and just then, beneath the pastor's droning voice, a hollow tap echoed, soft but unmistakable. Several mourners turned their heads. Some muttered, others hushed them. Martha's eyes darted to mine, cold and warning, as though daring me to say anything. The burial went forward. Caleb never showed. 2 volunteers lowered the box into the earth, soil raining down in muted thuds. I stood apart, hands shaking, sweat stinging my eyes in the autumn chill. The sound did not repeat, but every strike I'd heard was etched in me like a scar. That night, I returned to the embalming room, checked my notes, cross-checked intake logs. No record of embalming, no tampering, chain of custody intact. I wrote in the margin, "Unexplained anomaly, not to be spoken of." But silence doesn't erase. It festers. What I cannot reconcile, what keeps me awake, is the certainty of those scratches. Fresh, human, desperate. I have buried hundreds. Children, soldiers, suicides, and I know the stillness of death better than most. But Walter Greer, either I sent a living man into the ground or I laid to rest something that was never entirely human to begin with. Martha's insistence, Caleb's refusal, Ivy's innocent observation, They converge like threads around a knot I cannot untangle. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in folklore or curses or restless dead. And yet, when the chapel fell silent that morning and the knocking came, slow, steady, pleading, I knew every person heard it. They'll deny it, of course. People always deny what unsettles the world they cling to. Now when I pass the cemetery at night, the wind whistles through the stones, and I sometimes swear I hear it again. Not muffled now, not beneath 6 feet of soil, but closer, like a hand rapping against the inside of my own walls. The silence afterwards is worse. If you've ever heard something you cannot explain, knocks in the night, voices where no one should be, tell me, because I can't keep this inside much longer. And if you're curious, if you dare, I'll be here with more. Until then, check your walls, your doors, your beds. The dead don't always stay still. See you in the next one, if you dare. And if I'm not here, then you'll know the knocking found me, too.